So everybody knows that backups are important. However, backing up live databases takes a little bit of nuance because the files are constantly in use. Now, with databases today, I'm specifically talking about MySQL and or MariaDB. Now, they're functionally very, very similar. MariaDB actually exists because Oracle ended up purchasing MySQL and there were concerns about licensing and privacy or all sorts of stuff. Anyway, but they're very functionally similar. And honestly, the interesting part, I didn't actually know this about MySQL and MariaDB, but they were both created by the same person, Michael Widenius, and I probably pronounced his name wrong, but he has two daughters. He has Mai and Maria. And so the databases are literally named after his daughters, which I just thought was cool. I assumed Maria was named after somebody, but I thought the My in MySQL was like, like this is my database, open source, blah, blah, blah. Nope, it's after his daughter named Mai. Anyway, there are two basic ways to back up databases, and this is something you should do regularly. I want to show you both ways and how to restore and that sort of thing, but your situation, you may want to do both. You may want to do both types of backups. You may only want to do one. You may want to mix it up and do like one regularly and one occasionally. However you go about doing it, it's important that at the end of this video, you feel comfortable backing up databases. And now, I should confess, I have a dirty little secret, and I know that I have showed you how to have Docker share Docker instances that are serving out databases using the Docker network stuff. In real life, I actually don't like to host my MySQL or MariaDB stuff in a Docker container. I like to have one central server that's actually a full-blown machine that I can log into and run backup scripts on and stuff like that, and then point all of my instances to that. So I'm sorry if I misled you, but it's, a lot of people really want to share MySQL databases inside Docker. So that's why I've talked about that before. But I like to have MySQL and specifically MariaDB server that all of my containers and other stuff point to. Anyway, so we're going to be looking at a machine that is literally running MariaDB. Now, the two backup methods are a physical backup, and this is where you literally take a copy of the files in the var_lib MySQL folder, all of those files, and create a snapshot copy of them. So if something goes wrong, you can restore those files. Now, it's possible to restore like one folder, which is one database, but you're basically taking the entire database with all of its users and all of its stuff and making a complete snapshot of that folder. Now, the reason that it's not as easy as using traditional file backup software is that it's a live database and those are constantly being written to. So there is thankfully a tool we're going to look at that will I don't know what it does. It does some magic stuff with SQL so that you can make a copy of the files and not worry that like it wasn't written to or it was open or, it gets corrupted or anything like that. So we're basically going to make those physical copies using that physical backup method. Now, there are some pros and cons to this. One of the pros is it's extremely fast because we're just copying the actual files off of the server. We're not using SQL to like pull data back and forth. We're not making a lot of database calls or anything. We're not making any database calls. Well, maybe it does to pause the data so you can copy. It's very fast. Okay, so it's really, really quick. You can, in addition to the snapshot you have, if you have digital logs enabled on your MariaDB or MySQL server, you can actually go and get all of the transactions since you backed up to right before it crashed. That's beyond the scope of this video, but it's possible to actually restore up to the minute before it crashed all of the stuff into your database. So it's nice to be able to do that. But there are some cons. One, it uses more space. You're literally taking a full copy of everything there. So it takes a lot of space to do that. And one of the biggest cons, though, is that this is not a good way to migrate from one server to another. You're going to want to use the exact same server type, the same version. This is basically a disaster recovery type thing. This is not a data migration way because something's changed between versions and you're literally taking the files off the hard drive and that's what you're backing up. So that's a con, is that this is not a data migration from one to another. This is a way to restore if something goes horribly, horribly wrong. And now the other way that you can back up MySQL and MariaDB databases is to use a logical backup. Now, a logical backup just makes an SQL file, a SQL file, and it uses MySQL dump, and it just dumps all of the information from the database into a list of, basically it's like a list of commands to tell the database how to rebuild itself from scratch. It's really cool, and it has some great advantages. One of the pros is it's very, very flexible. And this is how you would migrate from one database to another. You can usually even go like between versions, and you can maybe between MySQL and MariaDB. I mean, again, these are just SQL commands. So you have the ability to take it to another whole server, import the SQL statements, and it will create your database or databases just like that. So that's a big pro. Another pro is that it can be compressed, right? This is like a text file on how to create a database. You can like gzip it on the fly to save space for your backups, which you should have multiple backups, you know, going back however long your backup procedures tell you that you need to do. So that's really good. There are some cons though. It's very, very slow. And it's slow because you are literally doing SQL calls to the database for every single thing the database has. You're saying, okay, database, tell me everything you know about everything, and I'm going to write it down. And so the database software, the server, crunches through its entire everything and then writes it to a SQL file for you. So it's not very fast. It's kind of slow. And that's the other con, is it taxes the server pretty heavily because you're making constant hammering calls to the SQL server. And because of that, it means that the final con is it's not terribly scalable. So if you have a really, really big database or multiple fairly large databases, doing a MySQL dump or a logical backup is not a great idea, because the time it takes to create and or restore that backup are just going to be so long. Sometimes you won't be able to complete the backup before it's time to back up again. So there are pros and cons to both, and just, you know, weigh what your needs are, and that's how you decide what kind you want. Or, you know, maybe you want more than one kind and you want multiple copies, and, you know, maybe a MySQL dump every so often. I don't know. Whatever makes sense for you, that's what you do. But I'm going to show you how to do both on the command line right now. So the first thing I'll show you is our actual database system. Now I have MariaDB installed here, so I'm just going to do MySQL-U for admin. And okay, here's something that's important to do. When you are creating backups with whatever method you use, you want to have a separate user. Don't try to use the root account. It's good to have a user specifically for backups that has read access to all of your data. And like if you're restoring, make sure it has write access and can create stuff. The reason is using root is just not good practice anyway, and to have a specific user, a MySQL user inside the MySQL server that you can access stuff, makes things a lot simpler. Because sometimes, especially with Ubuntu, the root user is weird. Like, you don't use authentication for root if you're the root user. It's weird. So not only is it a good security practice, but sometimes it'll save you a lot of heartache if you create a user in your MySQL or MariaDB database that will give you access to it. So my user is admin, and my password is admin as well, which is not a great security practice, but this is just a test server. Now what I want to show you is the databases. So show databases, and you'll see in here we have multiple databases inside the MariaDB, and we're going to back them all up using two different methods. And I'll even, if we have time, I'll try to show you how to restore as well. So let's get out of here. The first thing we're going to do is use a tool called Maria Backup. Now I'm going to use sudo because I want to make things simple. The problem is if you do it just as your user, and the MySQL user has to have access to the folder, you can get some permission issues. So when you're doing this in production, it's good to have a backup user who has access to, you know, the folders where you back up and stuff like that. I'm going to use sudo for simplicity's sake when I do this now. So sudo Maria Backup, and I'm going to do -- backup because I want to make a backup. And we'll do target. there we go, target dir equals, and I'm just going to put it in my current directory. So home s powers, and I'm going to call it db back. All right, that's the folder that will create in my home folder. My home folder is currently empty. We have to say user equals admin dash dash password equals admin. Again, poor security practice, but for what it is, that should work here just fine. And then we just press enter. Okay, it's going to go through and it's going to make a backup of all of my databases in a folder. Remember, it's just making a physical like file copy of the var lib MySQL folder, but it does it in a way interacting with the server so that we don't get corrupt files. Because remember, we can't just back them up with regular backup software because they're actively being written to all the time. So this is a tool that goes in and just does magic behind the scenes to make it happen. So we look in here, if we look inside, actually it's going to be owned by root. So sudo ls dbback, we'll see just that's a copy of the MySQL folder. Now, what we also need to do is prepare this. And this is because of the way InnoDB, which is a format that MySQL and MariaDB use, it does some weird things with timestamps and stuff. Basically, you want to prepare the folder that you backed up. I don't know why Maria Backup doesn't do this in one step, but it's very similar. We just say sudo Maria Backup. This time, instead of backup, we say prepare, and the target directory is home s powers db back, and we don't need to authenticate to the MySQL server, so we don't have to put the user and password here. But we do this, and basically what it does, it somehow makes configuration files. So the first time that your server sees this, if you restore it, it can just automatically start working. Now, you don't have to do this step until you're ready to import or restore, but because on a large database it can take a long time, it makes more sense to do the prepare step when you're backing up, when you have all the time in the world, as opposed to, oh my gosh, the database is down and everything is falling apart. So rather than worrying about preparing your database, then I always do a backup and prepare in one step so that it's ready to restore at a moment's notice. Okay, so anyway, we have the backup there, and to restore it, it's actually pretty simple. There's a couple things you have to think about. Now, we can make a backup without stopping the database. However, we cannot restore a backup with the database running because we literally have to replace the stuff that is in the folder. So the first step is to stop the database. So sudo systemctl stop MariaDB. It's going to stop the database. It's not running, but theoretically everything is hosed right now anyway, so it's okay that we're stopping it. And then we have to go into var lib MySQL, and we'll see in here these are the files that are supposedly now corrupt. So sudo rm -rf star, scary command, but nonetheless there's nothing in there now. Okay, so let's go back to our home directory here, and now we can restore it using MariaDB. Now, we could also just copy the stuff over. All this is going to do is copy it, but we can use Maria Backup to do it as well. So sudo Maria Backup -- copy back. You can also do -- move back, but I don't recommend that because it literally moves a folder and you've lost your only backup. So that's a weird feature to have, I guess. Maybe if you're running out of disk space and they're huge. But anyway, I always do copy back to make sure I keep my original copy in case I screw up. And then you say what target directory. So target dir equals home s powers db back. And that should be all it takes. So we press enter and complete it okay. And now if we go into var lib MySQL, the only thing we need to do now, we look, it's all owned by root, and that's no good because it has to be owned by MySQL. So sudo chown -r for recursive MySQL star. All right, so now it's all owned by MySQL, and all we need to do now is start MariaDB back up. So sudo systemctl start MariaDB. All right, it started, and now we should be able to have a fully restored and functional database. Let's see. MySQL -user admin -p prompt me admin, and moment of truth database. List databases. It's not list, it's show. Show databases. And there, now we have all of our databases back. Everything was restored from that backup. And that's how you do a physical backup and restore. Again, in the moment, it's probably going to be a little bit more panicky because everything is down, etc. But if you have a good backup, that's how you restore it. You just have to remember those couple things. It has to be prepared. You have to make sure to own it back to the database user's ownership to make sure that it owns it and it can, read and write to the files. And that's really all there is. And that is a physical backup. Now, really quickly, we do have time here. So I'm going to show you how to do a logical backup as well, because it's not really difficult. And for some cases, it's really, really useful. So in this case, I'm going to say sudo MySQL dump -u for user admin -p admin, again, my admin account, and I'm going to say all -databases, and that will create a MySQL dump of all the databases, but I want to redirect it into all.sql. Now we could redirect this to gzip as well and have it compress on the fly, but we'll just do this. And now if we do ls-l, we'll see we have now all.sql, and this is our entire set of databases that are in our MariaDB as one single SQL file. So we could re-import that in if we wanted to and get all of our databases restored, but it's really nice to just do one database. So let's say that my BOS database got corrupt, and that's my Brain of Sean blog that I actually imported in this test just so we'd have some stuff to work with. Let's say that got corrupted. So I could say, okay, I know I have a good backup, so let's delete the bad one, and we don't have to stop MariaDB in order to do this. All we have to do is say MySQL-u admin-p admin. So we're in here now, and I can say, all right, I know that right now the Brain of Sean database is bad, so I can just say drop BOS. And I am not good at this syntax here. Drop database BOS. There. Okay, so we dropped the database completely. There is no more BOS database in our MariaDB. We need to create a database, just an empty one, so there's somewhere to import our backup to. So I'm just going to say create BOS. Again, boy, I am bad at this. Create database BOS. Okay, so we've created a database. It's empty. There's nothing in it, but let's quit and change that. Now, all we need to do in order to populate that BOS database with our backup from that all.sql file, which contains all of the databases, is this. We can say MySQL-u admin-p admin 1 database, which is telling it we just want to do one database, not all of them. And the one database is BOS. So we want to import this one database, and less than we import it from all.sql. Notice the server is still running. Press enter. And now MySQL-u admin-p. Now if we do, I'm going to say, well, if we do show databases, we're going to see that, of course, BOS is there. I'm going to say use BOS. All right, so now I'm in there. Now I can say show tables. And look, our database has been restored. Remember, we dropped it and created it empty, but now it's been recreated and restored from that backup. It's actually super, super cool. Now, while we're on the command line here, let me get out of MariaDB. I do want to show you when I do a physical backup with MariaDB, I tend to automate it. And so just a simple automation script might look something like this. So user local, I had just one that I scrapped together. Bin. So something like this. I would say set a variable now time to the date, and this is just a date that has the month, day, year, and then dash hour in the minute, and it does a backup with a target directory of that date. So like backups, so I can do multiple backups because it's just going to make one based on the current time, user admin, and then the next step is going to be prepare that target directory that we just did so it's ready to restore as well. And I just do this regularly, and then I'll have regular backups automated using cron so that if something goes wrong, I can go back to either the most recent or the most recent before things went sideways and have those to restore. And you can do the same thing with a logical backup. You can script it and have it create those backups on the fly, compress them, rotate them, all of those things. So again, we know backing up everything is very, very important, but it can be a little more complicated with databases because they're always in use and you can't back them up with traditional backup tools generally. So having some ways to do that and automate it is really, really important. Hopefully this video cleared up the different ways you can back them up and you can fit one of these backup processes into your own cron system, backup system. And gosh, I hope you have a backup system. If not, let me know in the comments and I will talk about some other ways or some ways that we can do system backups and server backups and file backups and incremental ones, etc., etc., etc. But this is about databases and hopefully it was helpful. Remember to learn everything, do what you love, and most importantly, be kind. Leave a comment here if you found this video useful. It's kind of a one-off, not part of a series, but I thought it was a good thing for us to learn together. See you next time.